Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Metroid Monday on Shatter Our Souls with Novari. Now, today is probably the most scripted video I have made up to this point. And the reality is I simply don't do well with scripting. Um, but more than that, it's more so about the duality of the circumstances that crop up during this particular boss battle. Now, we already know what this is. You've seen the title. We're challenging Emperor Ing, the final boss of Metroid Prime 2. And honestly, the final boss showcases a lot of, shall we say, deviations from the norm for the duration of the rest of the game. For example, the Emperor Ing is a, I suppose, the polar opposite of Samus. Where Samus is in it to help others, the Emperor Ing is self-serving. The core of the light aether is with Samus, and the core of dark aether is with the Emperor Ing. Samus is a embodiment of galactic peace, and the Emperor Ing is, of course, a bringer of turmoil. Now, ordinarily, this is kind of where I would stop with this whole aspect. But I believe there's a little bit more to this whole circumstance, and it comes from, I suppose, an analysis of the attacks and movements of the Emperor Ing. This first stage is it's guarding itself. It wants to fight back against Samus, that's why it has the tentacles out and whatnot. But it doesn't have the means of fighting one-on-one directly with Samus. It's just trying to hold its own. At least that's my interpretation of this moment. And so what you end up with is this beast that is fighting tooth and nail for its survival, and Samus fighting for hers. The two of them are opposed in that whichever one wins this battle wins the war. And this war has been ongoing for what, 20 odd years at least? This is the climax. This is what the Luminoth and the Ing have been fighting for decades. Now, looking at the Emperor Ing's design at the moment, as you can see, it is almost like a tower at the moment. The center location, the center of the tower, being the core of the beast. It doesn't want to let its core be attacked, therefore flailing tentacle monster, whatever. No big deal. Upon being defeated in phase 1, it's going to retreat into a cocoon. This cocoon is virtually impenetrable. The only openings to it are the ones in which it makes itself, which I find an interesting little duality to it. Its only weaknesses are the weaknesses that it makes for itself. Its only opening is something that it makes. And that's kind of a key for this portion of the game, is ultimately you're going to end up at odds with this beast. And so it seems rather fitting. The third and final phase is the battle between the Emperor Ing in its true form, or its mutated form. The mutated form of the Emperor Ing is, how do I want to put it? It draws a lot of parallels between the Ing and the Metroid Prime, with the Metroid Prime having a five-legged style body, as well as having a hardened carapace that is nearly invincible to outside attacks, making it more or less the perfect defensive enemy against Samus. Samus is strong, but her skills lie less so in raw power, but in infiltration. And I've said this a couple of times in the past. It's not that Samus is weak, or that she's insanely powerful. she just knows how to use her abilities in a way that many other opponents wouldn't dream of. And so, I personally like that Samus is, I suppose, a little more reserved with how she uses her abilities. It makes her slightly more believable to me, but be that as it may. Step 1 of the battle is virtually complete. The tentacle monster form of the beast has 5-ish basic attacks. The Big Slam, which is a dark element attack. Portals, which it uses in order to get or attack from a distance, as well as kind of have some, shall we call it, invincibility frames as well, makes this portion of the battle fairly reasonable, but also incredibly difficult in the wrong circumstances. The third and final major attack is going to be the spinning around, swatting at everything in sight attacks. And they all kind of tie into the same mentality for the most part. The Emperor Ing is protecting itself. Phase 2, it becomes a cocoon, as I've said. This cocoon lets out an immense amount of what I'd call radiation. Is effectively phazon radiation. And Samus's job in this moment in time is to break open the cocoon to fight the beast. Now, something I didn't realize until now is that there is actually a lose condition during this. So, if you are unable to defeat certain portions of this battle within a certain span of time, it will actually end up going into full-on aggression mode. And full-on aggression mode is not fun, for me anyways, but it also showcases that there's more to this creature in how it reacts, as it is trying to find a way to A, defend itself, but B, once it figures out that Samus is not immune to the radiation that's going on throughout this battle, it wants to use that to its advantage. And the first way it uses it is by filling the room with this radiation. Now, it will dissipate after a couple of seconds, so it's not like this is a permanent debuff, but it is enough that Samus is in some pretty dire straits during this battle. The second, I suppose, portion of this is that this is Samus's only restock time during the entirety of the battle. There are no opportunities to get additional light ammo, dark ammo, or missiles until after the mutated Emperor is defeated. And even then, only a few items of each. Now, the mutated Emperor Ing is actually one of, if not the most powerful beings in the entire Metroid universe. And part of it stems from those laser beams. Now, in normal or veteran mode, those laser beams are powerful, dangerous, but they don't fully destroy their opponent every single time. Instead, they're more of a nuisance. They hold you in place and leave you open to other attacks. In this, in hyper mode, it has a chance of absolutely obliterating Samus every single time it uses those lasers. Because if one of them catches her, she can lose up to half an energy tank in one go. And that might not seem like much, but it's already used the ability 4 separate times. So, you have to be cautious about how we approach battling this thing. It does have some additional abilities. Notably, it has the jump, it has a dash attack, and it has adds. The light adds are weak to dark attacks, the dark adds are weak to light attacks, etc., etc. it's more or less a standard enemy in how you can approach it. And this is all well and good. In between each damage phase, where it is weak to both light damage or dark damage, you have a chance to deal damage by attacking the opposite. This is in and of itself just part of what makes this boss so powerful, is because about half of your damage has to be done using or all of your damage needs to be done using one of the 3 ammo types. Not just dealing damage in general, but doing so in a way... Oh, right, I forgot about that laser beam. Now, I find that the 3 ammo types, being light, dark, and annihilation, all kind of tie into one another to a degree, but the Annihilator Beam's ammo is the better, or is the best of the 3 under ordinary circumstances. What I mean by this is that Metroid Prime 2's bosses, the ammo types in Prime 2 are, because they are a limited resource, you're effectively fighting a race against time, until you can be able to beat your opponent soundly and consistently. You are effectively locked into this combat encounter. Now, I'll admit, this boss took 14 attempts over the course of an entire week, partially because every attempt takes roughly 20 minutes. This is not one of those bosses that you're going to beat in one sitting, very easily at least. This is one of those bosses where every time you challenge it, you're going to get farther. It is a battle of attrition. It is a battle of patience. Something that, up till now, we the players haven't had to deal with very much. Other tests of patience have been stuff like the, what's it called? Quadraxis, or the, Chica. Those 2 enemies are fairly reasonable opponents to fight against. But generally speaking, I've always found that this final boss has been far more dangerous and far more potent than anything prior. And to be honest at this point, I'm doing pretty good. I think that I'm sitting in pretty good spot right now, overall. The boss is about half health. I'm sitting at about 2/3, maybe a little under. And the boss is not really struggling, so to speak. But I have a decent amount of ammunition, and he's been avoiding the multiple laser attack, which for me is a sign of good things, because I unfortunately do not have the soul of a Dark Souls player, and I am very bad when it comes to dodge or spam dodging. I think that's what it would be called. Basically, I attempt to dodge multiple times in a very short span of time, which in certain games is perfectly fine. In this particular instance, right here, right now, it will get you killed. And I think that's a pretty notable circumstance. On top of all of that, the arena itself is lined with radiation, with phazon radiation, making it a dangerous battle to do anything with. And so, I personally believe that this is just perfect as a battle, but it gets even better if you really stop to think about it. Because this boss battle doesn't just deal with the duality between Samus and Emperor Ing. Everything about this is echoes. This boss, this battle, is more than the sum of its parts. Oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm out of light ammo, and basically out of missiles. Back to neutral phase. Got it. But the beast itself, the Ing, everything has built up to this. We know it has. And it's no secret that this is what we're dealing with. But I want to take a bit of a moment to tie into something that was said, I want to say 4 to 5 episodes ago. The battle against Dark Samus. I mentioned that Dark Samus was more than capable of battling Samus. And I do believe that I made a very reasonable statement. Samus, if Dark Samus fought at full potential and actually knew the power that it wielded, it wouldn't have been able to, or wouldn't have lost to Samus. But that's not the case. We are dealing with Samus versus Dark Samus in the, what I'll call the third and final fight. And it's a doozy. It is the battle that makes all the difference. And to emphasize my point, I want to take a brief look at Prime 3. Now, if you haven't played Prime 3, I apologize. Spoilers, I suppose. We'll get to it eventually. But Prime 3 has a little bit of an identity crisis. Dark Samus has numerous abilities that Samus could only dream of. And its, shall we say, potency when it comes to handling phase-on energy is second to none. Its capabilities of using super missiles and phase-on radiation beams are absolutely absurd. Again, this is intentional. And I love that about these last couple of bosses, last couple of enemies, is everything fits. And so, when I say that this is by far one of my favorite endgame enemies of all time, I mean that in the most gracious way possible. Because Dark Samus is dangerous. And I admit that I am one of the fanboys who wants to see Dark Samus show up in Prime 4. I don't believe it will happen. I believe that there's enough story evidence to say, hey, no, this isn't going to be a thing. But I'd love to see Dark Samus show up as a antagonist or minor antagonist in Prime 4. Because, honestly, while it didn't show up in Prime Hunters, and the setup for Prime 4 is more leaning in the direction of the Prime Hunters section of the series, there's still so much that they could explore with the character, in my opinion. Anywho, we have taken down the Emperor. And that's a good thing. I like that we've taken down the Emperor. The last of the dimensional energy. This is the last time that we'll be able to see Dark Aether in any degree of its true strength. And that's a little bit on the sad side. But also, I want to look at it as a positive. This world was never meant to be. And so its destruction makes sense in the grand scheme of things. But I want to talk a little bit, I suppose, about the final battle. Emperor Ing was the main opponent. Emperor Ing was the one that was supposed to be the final fight of the game. And yet, we end up with this 8-minute escape sequence. And I personally love these escape sequences. Hey, it's just part of Metroid's identity. Although I admit that Hunters went a little far with it, they still included it for the betterment of the game as a whole. But this escape sequence, unlike many others, has a lot more ramifications, a lot more behind it than just an escape sequence. This moment here is supposed to represent the final battle between light and dark. It is supposed to represent the battle between the chosen warrior and her doppelganger. Now, I believe that in this moment, Dark Samus is battling against Samus for control over the dimensional energy transfer device. To me, this showcases that Dark Samus doesn't want Dark Aether to fall to ruins. It wants Samus to fall, to fail in her quest in general. And this boss is literally the most dark, grotesque, powered up version of Dark Samus we have seen thus far, versus Samus with the true strength of the Light of Aether. It is, bar none, one of the most beautiful, compelling battles out there. And at this point, Dark Samus has gained a true understanding of what its capabilities are. And that's a terrifying thing to come across, because it means that Dark Samus, for all its strength, still wishes for itself above its opponent. Once again, it's that battle of the self-serving versus those that wish to serve and protect. Now, I had a little bit of a, I suppose, battle of wits with my significant other earlier today. And in it, I had mentioned that Samus in certain unnameable games had this fear that was the primary driving force of the character. And if you look at Prime 2's final battle, if you look at Prime 2 in general, there's nothing that really showcases a negative outlook. Rather, it is Samus finishing the fight that was started long before she ever had a chance to be involved. Samus, in this moment, just wants the battle to end, and so that she can save the Illuminoth from this time-honored foe. Anywho, that's neither here nor there, I suppose. Dark Samus, of course, is the final battle. The one that really sets the game apart. It, as an opponent, is nothing new at this point. But like a cockroach, it'll keep coming back. That is, I believe, why there is still a possibility of Dark Samus coming back in the for Prime 4. It has little to do with the, I suppose, storyboard and how that works, and more so to the fact that Samus had defeated Dark Samus 4 separate times, and each time has brought back, or it came back. Sans the last time so far. In Prime 2, it fought him in Dark Aether, or in Aether. Agon? In the Agon Wastes, in one of the space pirate facilities. And Dark Samus fell, disappearing into a cloud of Phazon dust or Phazon smoke, whatever you'd like to call it. And that's all well and good. But the second time it comes back, it appears in Torva's Bog. You can see it laughing as it realizes that it's put itself back together, that its failure to defeat its mortal enemy was little more than an inconvenience for it. And then you see it again, at the beginning of the Sanctuary Fortress. It destroys the bridge leading back to the main hub world. You're effectively stuck in the Sanctuary Fortress. If only he realized that you had the Magnabow at this point. He would have managed a lot better. But all of this tying back in is hey, this is what we're dealing with. This is what the world looks like. Dark Samus has a very profound impact on the world as a whole. And then you have the battle with Dark Samus in the Sanctuary Fortress. The creature itself is far more powerful, far more capable. Understanding of its newfound form, it seeks to find retribution against its lifelong enemy. And so, it battles Samus, tooth and nail, to what is presumed the death once again. And again, Samus prevails. Dark Samus gets frustrated, angry, and appears for the third time at the base of Emperor Ing's tower, beneath the Sky Temple, as Samus is trying to make an escape. Dark Samus, the last one holding the line, keeping its food source, keeping its life, its everything alive, in one last final effort to protect itself. This, more than anything else, showcases its tenacity, its raw desire for survival. And it seems more human. It wants what Samus has, but it doesn't have the strength anymore to take it. I also find it funny that the suit that it's wearing looks eerily reminiscent to the Varya suit, or rather the Phazon suit from the prior game. Little food for thought, but you can see the shoulder pads in that shot there. It's honestly an amazing piece of information and showcases how much the developers actually paid attention to it. So, I find it funny, the next time we see Dark Samus, it's going to take on an entirely new look. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will be saved for next time, when we begin Metroid Prime 3, Corruption. And honestly, I'm looking forward to it. I believe that this has given me newfound understanding of what hyper mode is, as well as what the developers were aiming for when creating this game. I don't believe that it's all that difficult anymore. Or rather, I believe it is incredibly difficult, but that it was scaled back to make it accessible to the players. Which is why I am looking forward to seeing just how hard hyper mode is in Prime 3. Because let's be honest, Prime 3 is not the hardest game out there. And with this, Samus gives back the light of Aether, returns to her Varya suit, and while the Illuminoth are probably bowing in awe, in reverence of this great warrior, this individual who has saved their entire clan, Samus, of course, leaves the same way she arrived, with her head held high, and naught but a wave, which showcases a little bit of who she is. In her mind, she did what she did because it was right. That she did the just thing. And I gotta say that I love Samus's mentality around that. This is also probably the best that Samus has looked up to this point. With the only other appearance of this particular suit being in Metroid Zero Mission. Anywho, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave subscribe, a comment, I'd love to see it. Until next time, I hope you all have a good one.